Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us on this webinar today where we're going to be talking all things productivity. We've still got participants joining, so I will just give it 30 seconds to a minute before we dive into the main content. But looking at the chat, it looks like me being a southerner, as you can probably hear from my accent, I'm losing out today because it looks to be much brighter up north. So wherever you're joining us from today, thanks for joining us, and I hope it's as sunny as possible where you are. Firstly, to introduce myself, my name's John. I'm part of the key account management team here at Posturite. I also lead on our managed service division. Now, you may have seen me on some of our webinars before, where in the past, perhaps I've been able to offer some expertise. Today, very much won't be offering any expertise because we're privileged to have two fantastic experts speaking to us about this. And for me, being privy to some of the information that we're about to talk about has been a little bit like watching a good Netflix trailer before the show actually comes out, where it's left me incredibly excited to hear the content that we're going to go through today. So really, really excited for this webinar. And my role really is going to be to try and put some of the questions that hopefully cover the main content and the main things that we want to know about from our experts today. However, having said that, I can see lots of you commenting in the chat, which is great. We also have the Q&A box that you might see at the bottom. So feel free to ask any questions. At the end of the webinar today, we're going to have a time allocated where we can discuss any questions that you might have for our experts. So please feel free to put your questions in, and also feel free to upvote any questions that you see. So if you see somebody else making a question that you think is a really good one, hit that upvote and that will put that to the top of the list, and we will make sure that those questions get asked and answered. A quick couple of other bits of housekeeping before we dive in. This webinar today is being recorded. We will be sending out the recording of the webinar as well as other resources. So please feel free to keep an eye on that inbox, and we'll make sure that will be dropping in within the next 24 hours. And as with all of our webinars, this information will be being allocated onto our website in the webinar section. So you'll be able to watch back the recording if you would like to. There'll also be the link to be able to download all of the slides and the content. So on that note, I'm hoping everybody that wants to join us has joined us. So what I would like to do is to introduce our experts today, which is Kate and Charlotte. I'm going to quickly give you some information about them, and then we'll dive straight into the content. So to introduce Kate, first of all, so Kate is somebody that is an accredited productivity and leadership coach, and she's also the founder at goodbusy.com. Really interesting about Kate is that she has over 49,000 people following her on LinkedIn, with over 22,000 people reading her newsletter, the Good Busy newsletter, every Monday. So she is also a former junior tennis player and is an expert in talking all things decision making, strategies, and excelling at work. So things that hopefully we're all looking to achieve. So thank you to Kate. And then we also have Charlotte joining us. Charlotte is an associate professor in psychology at the University of Sussex. She leads the Sussex 4-day week, which is a really interesting research-based support program, looking at this 4-day week concept that I'm sure we're all familiar with, and we'll touch upon that as we make our way through today. So we're absolutely privileged to have them both with us today. So Charlotte and Kate, hope you're doing well. How are you?
We're good. Hi, John. Hi, John. Hi, Charlotte. And hi, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Good stuff. So as I mentioned, what I'm going to look to do is to put some of the questions that hopefully our delegates today are looking to hear about. And then as a quick reminder, guys, please feel free to add any questions that I'll be putting to the panel at the end. But first of all, I think if we kick off with sort of some of the sort of anatomical side of things, and what do we think is the role of the brain around productivity, and how is that impacting our body and those types of things?
Thanks, John. If I can jump straight into that question. So the role of the brain in the body, they're absolutely fundamental to productivity and to doing well at work. Ultimately, where does work come from? It comes from the human brain. Whether you're a bricklayer or a marketing manager, what's producing that wall or that marketing material is the human brain. And the brain is also intimately linked in with the body. The two are always signaling to each other. And I'll speak about this in more detail a little later on. But what that means is if you're not comfortable in your body, that's going to be sapping your attention and impacting on your brain function, and thereby ultimately on your performance as well. So there's, of course, an important role here for ergonomics with our Posturite hat on of feeling comfortable in our working setup, but also a role through to stress and managing work demands with the impact that has on both the body and the brain, and thereby the potential impacts on productivity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can jump in and add something to Charlotte as well. So I absolutely agree. And I actually think that productivity is all about brain and body. And we have this misconception of productivity. I think that is an old definition that we still carry with us. And that's why many of us are stuck in this, what I call an OOO cycle: overwhelmed, overcommitted, and overworked. Is because we believe that productivity is the output per unit of time. But that's a very, very old definition. So we're taught to chase more because of that definition and go faster. And that's how we get things accomplished. But it's absolutely the opposite. The most productive people, they actually do less, not more. And the very easy formula that I give for productivity is it has three elements. It has the energy, it has the focus, and the time. So when you have energy, you can be extremely focused. But how do you have energy? That's all linked to the brain, right? Because all the activity comes from the brain. Well, you need to eat well, you need to rest, you need to get inspiration. Maybe you'll go for a walk, maybe you play with kids. When you have enough energy, you're going to be very focused. When you lack energy, you're going to lack focus and you're going to be very distracted. And today the world is extremely noisy, especially with AI. It's getting even noisier every single day. When you have energy, you have focus, and you have focus, then you're going to use your time more intentionally. Because in reality, you can't manage time. And we often think that productivity is all about time management, but it is impossible to manage time. It's like the sun. It comes up, it goes down, it comes up, it goes down. The only thing that we can do is use it with more intention. And that's why Charlotte mentioned it about the brain. Every activity comes from here. That's why for me, I call productivity a game of decisions. It's all about our choices first. It's all about what's worth doing and what's not worth doing at all.
Right. Thanks, guys. And I think one thing that our delegates can probably agree with, and certainly I hear a lot, is that companies are investing more and more in well-being, but yet we're hearing almost increased numbers of people suffering with burnout or sort of aspects of mental health and things. So what are the reasons behind that? It's almost contradictory. So it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
I can start on this one, Charlotte, if that's okay. So I think there are many reasons, and it could be a conversation and a webinar on its own. But I'll give you two. I think there are two sides to each coin, right? So I spent 15 years in corporate roles, and I truly believe still today that communication is one of the biggest issues that companies face, no matter the size of the company. And I believe that there is a very big disconnect between the programs that are being created, the initiatives that are being put in place, with reality, because we don't have enough conversations in the workplace. We have a lot of telling, but we don't talk. We don't ask enough questions. And that's why a lot of people who are actually busy implementing all these amazing initiatives, because they truly are, they don't talk to people who actually need those initiatives, and they go after trends or maybe top management requests, or maybe they come from their own perspective. And so this is one. And if you flip the coin, there is the responsibility on the person themselves, so on the employee, on ourselves, because we tend to outsource well-being to the company. My company is not investing in my well-being. My company is not taking care of my well-being. But if we were to have a coffee right now and just talk about that, probably your definition and your expectation of well-being will be very different from mine. And this is where it all starts. We need to define what well-being means for us personally. And then we can see if our company actually meets those needs, or maybe we can ask for something, or maybe we can make these needs meet after work or outside of work, right? But we don't have these conversations. We don't ask enough questions. And to me, that's why we do a lot of things, great things, but they are not meeting the real needs.
Yeah, I'll just chip in to follow up on that communication and conversation aspect, which I totally agree with, Kate. Something we see when we try and help our 4-day week employers find efficiencies is facilitating conversations amongst the staff, because I think a lot of employers might look to put on some time management training, and sort of leave it at that, and just hope that the individual staff members can go away and make use of that training and change their habits and routines around how they're engaging in work communications, like asynchronously via messaging or synchronously via meetings. But if you're not having a conversation with your colleagues about how you want to engage in those synchronous and asynchronous activities to benefit you all and in a way that works well for you as a team, it's hard to make progress as an individual. So there's both the individual behaviour change element, but crucially, you need to have the conversations with your colleagues about how you're going to implement that as a team.
Great stuff. And if I can ask quite a direct question, which I'm sure certainly comes from myself, and I'm sure a lot of our delegates, but in which case, why does everybody always seem overwhelmed and overworked? I don't know who wants to take that one first. I appreciate it's quite a direct question.
I think it's again comes first of all from the definition that we have about productivity. We're wired that productivity is all about doing more. So what we're going after is for that more. We believe more is more. So we are squeezing everything from every single minute of the day. And we don't have any time for our human needs, like going to the bathroom. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but to me, it happened in the past because I've been there so many times that I don't have time. I don't have time to drink a glass of water, to get a bathroom break, right? Or just to breathe. So I think this is the misconception of productivity that we still live with. And what we need is to learn to slow down. The problem is that nobody teaches us how. Nobody has ever taught us how to manage work so that we don't drown. In college, we learn what kind of work we will do. We arrive to the workplace, we receive or we're giving work to do, or we take initiative on the work that we want to do. But nobody teaches us how to do that work so that we don't drown. Let me give you a very simple example. Meetings, email management, those are considered to be basic skills, but who taught us? In 15 years of corporate experience, I've never had a training. A client of mine who has an amazing career mentioned that the only training that they had on meeting management was in 1996. So we are not taught. So we're putting too many things onto our calendar, and we are feeling that we're constantly running behind because we're chasing more instead of actually, again, eliminating and focusing on less, on what's really important.
Stuff.
Yeah, I think the concept of balance is important there. We talked about the asynchronous messaging, synchronous meetings, and I think that's where a lot of our calendar space is. And then where do we get the quotes real work done? Of course, it's all work. But I think one thing we're not taught, Kate, is how to balance those different components of our working lives. And often I think we're drawn towards the messaging and the meetings because it feels productive. And of course, we're also thinking about our colleagues and wanting to support them. Sometimes those requests are coming from colleagues who are seeking your advice or support, or they need some input from you in order to progress their own work. But it can start to just get out of balance with all of those interactive activities taking up more and more time, and us feeling like we're so time pressured that we just can't get to some of those more desk-based solo activities. And no one's taught us how to engage in that balance. And of course, that balance is going to be different for different roles as well, for managers versus people in other sorts of roles within the organisation. So having those facilitated team conversations, I think, can be helpful. But I think John's going to show us some examples of how we can practically go about solving this.
Yeah, concept I found really interesting in our pre-webinar chat was a little bit about this concept of time boxing and how I thought I was doing some really good things, and then Kate, you showed me an example of perhaps a diary that looked very similar to mine, and perhaps we had some discussions that perhaps it wasn't the right thing to be doing. So it'd be really interesting if you wouldn't mind just sharing some of your views around that and what might be good around diary management and meetings. That'd be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel that in business world, in the workplace, we have two extremes. We have people who do not protect their calendars, so they only use their calendar to track meetings, and that's easy for people to grab their time. I call it like peanut. You think that time is peanut. That's how you value it, right? So everybody can grab it. It's always available. It's free. And then you have the other people who are over time boxing their calendar. So that's again that mindset, I will squeeze every minute of the day to do something. And when your calendar is time boxed this way, it doesn't have any blanks in between, it doesn't allow you for any flexibility. But the world is very uncertain, especially today. But there is one thing that we are very, very certain of, is that change is a constant. Something always comes up. And when you time box in this way, there is no way that you have flexibility or agility in your day, right? And I think one thing, and we can go to the next slide, because I'll give you a few tips, and just for everyone listening, you'll get the full playbook with examples and a few pictures afterwards that you can download from the Posterize webinar website, sorry. But I want to mention just 3 tips here. And the first one, John mentioned that I played tennis. I trained 10 years to become a tennis pro. And I think that there is something that athletes know and do better than business people, is that they remember that they are humans. There is no athlete that trains 10, 12, 15 hours a day and then the next day goes and trains 10, 12, 15 hours a day. And yet this is how we do at work a lot, right? We work very, very long hours. It's because athletes understand that in order to perform, they need to, first of all, remember their biological needs. So they need to eat well, they need to rest well, and that's why they schedule time for it. And for many years myself, for instance, I didn't eat lunch, or I swallowed my lunch in 5 minutes. And it all changed when I finally start time boxing my lunch. So maybe I didn't have it every single day at 12 or 12:30 or at 1. I would move it around based on what else was happening in the day. But at least I gave myself time to have a meal, because what's in your calendar is important and what's not in your calendar is not. So number 1 tip, remember that you are a human, and so prioritize your human needs first. There is a fantastic book on this from Arianna Huffington called Thrive. So she talks about how deprioritizing sleep led to a very, very difficult burnout. So it's a fantastic book to read. A second tip that I would like to give you is, we human beings are creatures of habit. We like defaults, right? And so in our calendar, it doesn't matter whether you're using Google Calendar or using Outlook, there are a lot of defaults, and especially those time blocks of 30, 60 minutes. So we tend to, whenever we schedule a meeting or we're scheduling in time slots, we're jumping into those defaults. What I'm inviting you to do is to use 15-minute blocks. They will give you a lot more flexibility in your day. Let me give you a very simple example with meetings. A lot of people have 60-minute meetings. That's the classical one, right? And sometimes maybe you have 3 points or 3 goals to discuss or to reach during your meeting. So instead of having a 60-minute meeting, slice them down to 15, 15, 15. What it does to your meeting, it adds this additional healthy time pressure. And with that additional healthy time pressure, you need to deliver more effort. And when you put more effort, your focus is on much higher alert, and you will achieve your goals much faster. So small, shorter, very focused meetings are much more productive than your 60-minute meetings. Okay. And then the third one is find confidence bias. We all have it. And that's why that's to the point that its productivity is very closely linked to the brain. So we overestimate our own capacity. Okay, so for instance, if you are planning to do a specific task that will take you 1 hour, instead of 1 hour, add a buffer. And for me personally, my best practice, what I do for tasks that I really don't like to do, my buffer is at least 50%. So 1 hour becomes 1 hour and a half. Because when you don't understand and you're not aware of the confidence bias, you're going to schedule way too many things and you're going to constantly run behind. But if you give yourself a little bit of buffer, what happens is that maybe you'll finish the task earlier, fantastic. You'll get a lot of happy hormones boost, and you'll be even more motivated and more productive for the rest of your day. And there are many more examples. They're all in the playbook, and you can download it after the webinar.
Very much. And if I can ask you both, Charlotte and Kate, what are the common challenges that you see to productivity across the different organizations that you work with?
So I think across all sorts of different organizations from different sectors, everyone at some point has to do some admin time, some messaging. At some point you have meetings, and that's interspersed with tasks that are more you getting on with something by yourself. And something that I am seeing more and more commonly, you touched, John, on sort of the way the world is going with how fast things change nowadays, is a lot of employees report to me that they get sucked into reactive firefighting, and that report that they were planning to work on, or those PowerPoint slides they needed to do, because it's not quite as urgent today, falls by the wayside. But then these tasks become urgent because that time hasn't been protected. So it's a careful balancing act with the time boxing, where Kate's shown we need to build in that focus time for ourselves, plus some buffer time. And that means also being aware of how frequently do I engage in the synchronous and asynchronous activities with my colleagues.
Yeah, I think also there is a bigger, it's a bigger topic, and maybe I have slightly, it's a perspective that we normally don't talk about, but we talk about companies and organizations in third person. But if you ask yourself, what is an organization? It is a group of people. And every single person is part of the group. So maybe it's a cliche, but everything starts from us. So whenever we talk about, overwhelm, overwork, etc., we need to flip kind of the script and ask ourselves, where are we in this equation? Because that's, again, coming back to the brain, it's part of the omission bias. So it's a choice. We can be part of the problem, or we can be part of the solution. And I think that understanding that companies do not exist without people, this is really, really helpful to put yourself in that equation and maybe actually make better choices, take better actions, and decrease your own overwhelm and overwork first.
Great stuff. Thank you. And a quick reminder that at the end we'll be doing a Q&A session. So please do put your questions in the Q&A box. But it made me smile because I had a question for you, and Kirsty put a question in exactly thinking the same way as me. In that at the moment we seem to have this overwhelming meeting culture within the workplace. And it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts about that. I'm sure you agree with that. But what can we do around that? I'd be interested to hear your views.
Yeah. So I think it all starts with something that we've already discussed, the preparation. So we're not taught how to lead effective meetings. We just kind of are thrown into the ocean, and slowly we're learning what to do, what not to do, right? But then there are patterns, and we're running on autopilot. So it's difficult to stop because we're rushing all the time. But I also like to remind, when I work with leaders, I like to remind them that meetings do not schedule themselves, and they do not accept themselves. So we either schedule them or we accept them. But here's the funny thing, is that whenever we always tend to think that our meetings are always productive, but those that are scheduled by other people are not, right? And that's, again, that's this cognitive shortcuts that we always take, because when things go well, we sort of pat ourselves on the shoulder and say, well done. But when we don't like something, that's an external circumstance. That's not me, that's someone else, right? And so I believe that everything, once again, starts from you. So it's you who needs to kind of lead by example. So when you receive a meeting invitation, instead of going on autopilot, accept because there is a free time in my calendar, we'll ask a question. Does it have a goal? Is it clear why we're meeting? Is there an agenda? Is there a preparation to do? If not, you have the right to decline, or you can just reach out to the organizer and ask. Maybe they forgot to mention that, right? And when you're scheduling your own meetings, make sure that you have all those three. And most importantly, there is another bigger issue in meetings. 99% of people admit to multitasking in meetings. And it's practically impossible to feel a meeting was productive if you multitask, because we cannot focus on two things at the same time. Our brain is very process oriented. It's either we're in the meeting or we are in the emails. So it all starts from us. We can change that. 45% of meetings do not have goals. We can cut 50% of the meetings just by making sure that every single one has a clear goal.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned there about the brain can only do one thing at a time, Kate. Unfortunately, we have all only got one prefrontal cortex each. And just to add to this difficulty with meeting creep coming into your diary throughout the working week, something I sometimes hear is individuals reporting frustration over, Friday morning I planned to work on my report, but someone else has requested a meeting then, and they're saying that's the only time that they can do because they were writing their report on Thursday. So if it's feasible within your immediate team where you might be having most of your meetings, can you have a conversation about communal focus time periods and protected no meetings time, and have a conversation about how frequently is that, what's the duration of it in relation to the nature of the work that you do, and how long people might need to have protected time for. So it's always a custom implementation, but just having that conversation with your colleagues about when are we all going to commit to not having that meeting creep coming in.
Yeah. I just want to, John, if it's okay, pick up on something that Charlotte said again on the conversation. So have more conversations, and it's more when and what if questions. If in Charlotte's example, a meeting request comes in, you can ask, what if we had it in the afternoon? It's just one question, but potentially it would be absolutely fine for the person, right? Or what if we had it next week? Or when do you need this information by? So we don't necessarily ask this kind of questions, and we don't have, because we don't have asked questions, we don't have enough conversations.
Yeah, it's really, you've both made points around sort of perhaps lack of training, levels of communication, but also managers and leaders and things, a phrase that we've used. I just wondered if you could sort of develop that point a little bit, and actually, what do we see the roles of managers or us as individuals or team leaders, and how does that affect in our sort of productivity?
I think, I mean, I can talk about team leaders and or managers. There is the way that we learn the most as human beings is by observation. So that's why, for example, social media is so popular, and trends, right? And things that go viral on social media are so popular because when we see something that we like or we're curious about, we want to test it, we want to try it, we want to copy, we want to imitate. And that's what's happening in the workplace as well, especially when you are in a position of authority, like your team leaders, people looking up to you. So they are observing your behaviors because they believe that these behaviors got you where you are today. And so I always say that your team is your mirror. You're looking at yourself. And so if whatever behavior you want your team to express or to have on a daily basis, the habits, it again starts with you. So you need to have that behavior first. And I think it's a very, actually, I think it's probably the easiest and less confrontational way to drive change as well, because people don't need a buy-in because they see you, they like what you have, what you do. And so there is a natural buy-in that is happening in this way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that modeling is crucial. Even something as ostensibly simple as going for a lunchtime walk to get some headspace, rest, recharge, and come back feeling refreshed and with full brain power. Even just 10 minutes around the block, that will make a difference for you. But if you're in a managerial position, you modeling that behavior helps give your colleagues the permission to do that as well. And I think another thing managers can consider is individuals. There's absolutely a role there for people to look at their own routines and work habits, and, for example, trying to set aside time in their calendars for some focus time periods. but you can help as someone who has an overview of your whole team in perhaps scheduling a facilitated conversation and holding that dialogue space for colleagues to chat to each other about blockers to their own productivity, and what might you like to do as a team going forwards, for example, around communal focus time periods.
Yeah, fantastic. And if I can ask a little bit about productivity tools, or dare I mention the word that I'm sure affects all of our lives more and more, AI, and how might we be utilizing some of these things in order to manage our time more efficiently?
I think that they definitely can help, but I think it starts before that. It starts with the brain, it starts with the choices, because any app, a productivity app, is just a virtual to-do list. Who decides what gets on the list? You. Who decides what gets prioritized on the list? You. Who decides what gets done and who actually does the work? You. So I think that's the part we kind of forget. It starts, first of all, before that, right? Understanding how we function, understanding our own internal operational system first. Because there is a fantastic quote that I love from Peter Drucker, who said, "There is nothing less productive than optimizing work that shouldn't be done at all." And so last year, I read a report, I think it was mentioned in Forbes, if I'm not mistaken, that 77% of people today say that AI actually added work, because there is such a big expectation that AI will make us more productive, will help us go faster and do more, that we continue doing the work that shouldn't be done at all. And we continue adding more work that shouldn't be done at all. And so we are even more and more overwhelmed.
Yeah, I'd like to sort of flip it back and say, I don't think these are the answer. I think the human brain is the answer. And these are just AI is just another form of a tool, a digital tool. And if you don't use those tools with intention, you're not going to get the results that you want. Yeah. So it's really about the psychology. Of course, I'd say that I'm a psychologist.
I agree with you. I'm not a psychologist, but I agree with you. Yes.
No, and if I can ask another direct question, and around your own personal journeys in managing your own time and productivity, if you could pick out one thing that perhaps has been the most surprising thing, or that's allowed you to be most supportive in your journey, I think that'd be really interesting to hear.
Well, for me, it actually going from that mindset that more is more to the mindset that more is less. And there are two things that happened in my life that led me to that mindset. So in my 20s, I was living in China. If you know anything about China, it's extremely fast paced, and it's really a culture of more. And in my 30s, in the beginning of my 30s, I moved to Thailand, which is much slower. There is a different pace there. So I slowed down myself. And plus, I joined a company, a hospitality company, with a philosophy, slow life. So this taught me that actually you don't need to ride a high-speed train every day to achieve great results. You can actually ride a bicycle, and it's much more efficient and much more sustainable, because a bicycle can go on a very high speed, but it also allows you maneuver. So you can turn around, you can pivot, you can stop, right? It gives you those moments of reset and thinking and sort of, oh, this is not working, I'm tossing it, I'm not doing it again. And the second thing is, I'm a massive fan of TED Talks. I watched over 2,000 TED Talks. And there is one that I truly loved, and I watched it more or less at the same time when I moved to Thailand, is The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz. There is a brilliant book as well. And it really explains why more is actually less and less is more. And this is sort of, I think, the flip that helped me today to have a sustainable productivity that I have and not be overwhelmed, overworked, and overcommitted like I was 10 years ago.
Fantastic. Thank you.
My example is perhaps a little more basic and a little less inspiring, but hopefully might give some insight into, I think it's always an evolving and iterative practice to work out how to best optimize your day and make those intentional choices that Kate talks about. And that will also evolve as your role evolves as well. So I think there's always experimentation to be done. And I've gone almost on a 360 experiment with my email practice. I'm an academic, so I like having quiet time by myself to get on with some big picture thinking. I love my focus time so much that I was getting frustrated about spending lots of time on emails. And so I engaged in some time boxing, but put only very small and infrequent time boxes in my calendar for emails. And then I was really feeling the pressure of not getting back to people promptly and feeling bad about that. I kind of swung too far the other way to isolation. And so I realised, well, what's appropriate for me and my role at this point in my career is to engage in emails once a day. I usually do it 4 p.m, which is the point at which I can't engage in the more cerebral, hard thinking time, but I can engage in some communications. And once a day is appropriate for me because I'm not in a kind of firefighting cardiac unit type role. Other roles, perhaps customer service facing might need to be more frequent than that. But by committing to doing that once a day, it's helped me keep on top of it. And so now when I'm in my focus time periods, I can really enjoy going deep, knowing that I have got sufficient time later on in the day to tackle the email inbox and just keep everything in balance, really. So I think it's always an ongoing experiment to find your balance, and please don't be afraid to tweak things and try the next iteration.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for those tips. Much appreciated. And I think at this point in the webinar, Charlotte, you mentioned, we're very privileged to have you here as a psychologist and academic. So I think I'm just going to hand over to you just to go through some bits and pieces of your research and things that you think might be interesting for our delegates. And then to our delegates at the end, we'll come back to do a Q&A session. Thank you to those who have dropped those questions in. I can see all those and we'll be looking to tackle those shortly. And please feel free to add any more questions that you would like to get answered. But I'll hand over to you at this point, Charlotte, if that's okay.
Brilliant. Thanks, John. So this is an opportunity to share some research insights, and we hope that having got some inspiration for some practical tips from our discussion, now you might get some ideas about the latest research on the role of the brain in the body and productivity. So please do keep putting your questions in the Q&A box as we go. If you have any thoughts that are occurring as we look through some of the research data. So my background is I study the links between biology, well-being, and how we perform at work. And as we've already touched on, the brain and the body really are critically important for productivity because it's the brain that produces that work. And the brain is linked into the body via a process that we as scientists call interoception. That's the process by which we feel what's going on inside our body in our organs, like how fast our heart's beating or shallow breathing or a stomach pain. And we can do this because our internal organs, like our heart, are actually embedded with nerve fibers, and these send signals up to the brain to tell the brain what the body is feeling. So when we're stressed, those physiological signals of stress are coming into the brain, and of course that takes up our attention. And the brain sends signals back down to the body. So if you get a stressful email come through, then that will engage a bodily response because you're perhaps having a little bit of a fight or flight response to that cognitive event. And the problem for well-being, the knock-on problem for productivity is that we can't escape our bodies. And so when we're stressed and experiencing those physiological stress signals, that saps our brain function because the brain is having to attend to those stress signals from the body. But when the brain and the body are in a relaxed flow state, then you've got the literal brain space to be able to focus on work and be good busy with our Kate hat on instead of bad busy. So now to tell you about some of our research insights, we ask employees how they're getting on at work, we monitor sleep, and we also investigate brain function using MRI brain scans. And one research project we're working on at the moment is looking at the 4-day working week and how that can lead to higher performance at work. And we think there are two things going on here, two routes to that higher performance. One route is because staff are better rested. So then when they are at work, they're really firing on all cylinders at maximum brain power. And then the second route is because staff are really motivated to find efficiencies and get more done in less time through making those intentional choices that Kate's touched on. And we've got some evidence for both of these routes to higher productivity. And now, of course, most people don't have a 4-day week. That's not something that would be on the cards for most people. But nevertheless, hopefully everyone here can still take some core learnings away from here of the importance of rest and the importance of that motivation to find efficiencies. So firstly, looking in a bit more detail at the importance of rest and well-being for productivity. What we found is the more that someone's burnout improves when they switch to a 4-day week, and the more that their sleep improves, the more their productivity goes up. So that demonstrates this very close link between good well-being and performing well at work. It's intuitive, but the research really does back that up. So addressing overwhelm and not taking work home with you, I think, are two key actions that really will support better productivity and performance through a better rested brain. So next, to show you some of the brain changes that take place when employers switch to a 4-day week. And again, most people won't have that, but freeing up time with Kate's good busy techniques will also apply here in terms of some of the effects that that has on the brain. So there are two brain areas that I want to talk about that are particularly important for this link between well-being and productivity. Now, firstly, the default mode network. This is the default mode that your brain goes into when it's not engaged in an attentionally demanding task. For example, looking out the window on a train journey, or if you're in the shower. And the default mode network is associated with creativity and with problem solving, because what it does is it creates the literal brain space for the unconscious problem solving that's been going on at the back of your mind to come into consciousness. And of course, this is really important in a workplace context. But to access the benefit of it, to access your default mode network, you do need time away from your desk, away from your focused activities. For example, a short lunchtime walk is the perfect opportunity to engage your default mode network. The next area that's important is the insular cortex, shown there in blue. So this is the region that underpins interoception, because it's the area of the brain that receives those ascending nerve signals from the body, from the organs, signalling to the brain what the body is feeling. So the insular cortex is really crucially related to stress and also to mental health. So firstly, in the default mode network, what we see when people switch to the 4-day week is that default mode network connectivity between the two hemispheres increases. What does that mean? That means that the network underpinning problem solving is enhanced when people take that time to rest, to recharge, and to get that literal headspace back. Again, that's intuitive, but the data, the research are backing that up. Next, we've seen that mental health improves when people switch to the 4-day week, and that reduction in anxiety there in the middle, that's particularly important because that's associated with greater activation in the insular cortex. What does that mean? It means the more that someone's mental health improves with time to recharge, the more their insular cortex function is boosted. And that's the area underpinning interoception. So more accurate interoception can be enhanced with time to rest. Then, just to start wrapping my section up, the other side of the puzzle to that high performance is the behaviour change side of things. And we can see with our employers in the study, when they're seeking to get more done in less time, there are key aspects of working life that they often change. And a central pillar is focus time, time set aside in your working day, in your calendar for your most important tasks. And then these are some of the strategies that you can use to embed focus time in your working days, such as time boxing in your calendar. So to summarise what we've learned from our research, really we are seeing that the research evidence that there's a brain and a body base to well-being, and then the knock-on impact of that to productivity. And that is because the brain and the body are interlinked. And when you free up time in your working lives, whether that's a 4-day week or perhaps the more attainable good busy approach, this increases your productivity for two key reasons. One, because you're better rested, so then you're really working at optimum brain function. And then secondly, because you're forced to focus your limited time on what really matters. So just some practical advice from me to end on. Please do take regular breaks, especially away from your desk or your main working environment, because that gives you your default mode network time for that problem solving headspace. I really recommend avoiding taking work home. Sleep is so important for productivity at work the next day. And as we've touched on, start a conversation with colleagues if you can. What is it that's most important for you individually and as a team to achieve? And what is it that's holding you back from that? Is it too many meetings? Is it being pulled into firefighting? So think about what changes you can make as an individual, but also together as a team. And finally, if you'd like a brain scan with us down here at the University of Sussex, our programme is very much still open, and you can take part either in the 4-day week group or as a control employer, where you can receive productivity training from us and a free report on staff wellbeing and performance, but without changing your working hours. So do get in touch if you're interested in either of those arms of the programme. So we're now going to move on to the Q&A section. There's loads of wonderful questions that are coming in on the Q&A. Keep them coming, and I'll hand back to John.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Charlotte. And yes, as Charlotte mentioned, we've had loads of engagement, guys, which is absolutely fantastic. Thank you for that. A quick reminder, I've seen some questions going into the chat section. If you can just make sure you pop any questions into the Q&A section. So that's where we'll be checking them. And also, thank you for the people who have been upvoting on the questions. That's really helpful for us, because we now, as Charlotte mentioned, move into the stage where I get to ask probably better questions, because they're questions coming from the delegates rather than myself. And we've got quite a few questions to get through. We'll get through as many as we can within the time that we have left. But if there's anything that we fail to answer, if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us. But the first question that I have is, when time blocking, how would you advise best keeping the time block in place, looking to avoid distractions or being pulled away, turning notifications off emails, work focus on iPhone had helped, but programs like MS Teams mean even more busy. Even when busy, can still be contacted. So are there any ways to dodge this?
Yes, definitely. But I think, again, the conversation with colleagues about kind of what's the etiquette around that is going to be key. So all of these devices, this Teams, email, they all hijack the brain's attention system. They get into your dopamine system, those little pings and notifications, and suck your attention. Sometimes people describe to me going dark, where they will close absolutely everything down. But having the conversation with colleagues about how long do you feel you can go dark for before coming out to help someone that might be coming in as a help request on Teams. Just having that conversation to identify what's the best practice for you and your team, I think, will be key.
Yeah, I agree with Charlotte on the conversation piece, because it's all about boundaries, right? But boundaries is we set boundaries for ourselves, not for others. But we need to communicate those boundaries to others. If we don't communicate them, it's very difficult also for others to have to respect them. So this is one piece of it. And I think that notifications is something that I want to mention. There is, and Charlotte, if you have any research on this, maybe you can share. What I read in the research is that majority of actions that we take, over 80%, come as a result from visual cues, what we see. So think about it. Why notifications that we have on our phone, on our computer, they are not just bing, but they come with a message that you can see. It's because there is 80% chance when it's a message that you can see that you will click on it. And if it's just bing, the sound, it's only 11%. So technology, it studies our human operational system. And that's why we are dependent on technology and not the other way around. So what I'm inviting you to do here is also, like Charlotte said when she was sharing her journey, experiment. Remove everything, every single notification that you can, even for a week, on your emails, on your social media, etc., and see how it goes. Right? Build that awareness, build that knowledge about yourself, about your own operational system. And then if nothing changed, you can always put them back. But I think the notifications, we're always looking for complex solutions, but this one is just in front of you and you can do it today.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. The next question from Kirsty, which I alluded to earlier, but it doesn't surprise me that there's a lot of interest around this meeting culture and the amount of meetings that we had. And I'm sure it's views shared by others when Kirsty says that my workplace seems to have a ridiculous amount of meetings, and then people are stressed because they have no time to do the actual work required off the back of that meeting. Is there any advice that you can share with regard to the number of meetings versus productive work?
I think that everything depends on the context, right? So let me give you an example from my previous work when I was in corporate space. Sometimes I used to manage client events. When you have client events and you're working on something, you need to interact with a lot of people. So naturally, during that period of time, you will have more meetings. And then there are maybe a season where you have less events. And so naturally, you have a little bit less meetings during that time. So I think everything is contextual. I think I'm not for eliminating meetings because, once again, companies have groups of people. We need to collaborate, communicate, and cooperate. And working in silos is way worse. So we need meetings. We just need more productive meetings. And where does it start from? So my Good Busy framework has 5 steps, and you can apply them for meetings as well. So whether you're scheduling them or you're receiving a request, it's the same thing. First, pause. What's the meeting goal? Right? Everything starts with the end. If there is no goal, there is no point of having a meeting. Second, preparation. Think of athletes. They invest 80% in preparation, and we don't do this enough. We don't request enough preparation before the meetings, right? This will make our meetings much more productive. Third is for what I call forward, sort of get perspective. This is the agenda of your meeting. What's important and what should we put on hold? Okay, sometimes it's worth to say we're going to talk about these 5 things and these 5 things we're not talking about, so everybody knows. Then play when you are in the meeting, monotask, be there, be present. What can help you there? Don't turn on your computer, take handwritten notes. There is a lot of science-backed research that they keep you focused and much more productive than the notes that we take on our computer. And finally, the last step is replay. It's very important to replay how did the meeting go. And this way, to Charlotte's points earlier, you will experiment and you will learn what makes a meeting productive and what doesn't make meeting productive, what needed a meeting and what didn't need a meeting. So it's all sort of going in circle, and every single time you go through all these 5 steps. Okay.
Fantastic. And next question that I've got here is how important is it for managers to lead by example and change their behavior to cultivate a more productive working environment and to reduce stress levels?
Yeah, I think we touched on this earlier, that the modelling is really important there. But I think there's also a role for some sort of reverse modelling as well in the individual staff. They're the ones who know their work best, and so they're going to have good ideas about how they could change things for themselves, but also potentially for the team. So if something's working well for you, maybe going for a lunchtime walk or a time boxing approach you've taken, can you share that in a team meeting and feed that up to your colleagues, to your manager? This is working really well for me. I think it could work well for other people too. What do you think?
And I think it's also about coming back again to communication and conversation, right? Communicate what are your needs for you to be productive. Right. For me, my personal example, for instance, when I was in corporate roles, my whole team and my manager knew that yoga is a must. If I don't do yoga, I'm going to be very stressed. So sometimes I would be in the meeting and my manager would stop it and say, you go because you have to go for your yoga. So communication is very, very important.
Fantastic. Thank you. Another question here is around mistakes. Can we discuss mistakes and what would help us to prevent us getting to the point where we are making mistakes due to work overload?
Well, I think one thing, and we talked about it just a little bit, multitasking. Actually, a lot of people still think that it's a strength, but actually it not only slows us down when it comes to productivity, but it actually creates much more mistakes. So that's where focus work that Charlotte was talking about and blocking that time is very important, so that you learn to monotask, because you go much faster and also you deliver much more quality work. So you remove that unnecessary duplicate work that potentially mistakes create. So that's, I think, that the part about mistakes that comes from productivity. But then also I think we once again need to remember that we're all humans. we're always going to make mistakes, and that's absolutely okay. I'm not sure who said this, but I heard somewhere, we don't learn much from success. We learn much more from mistakes. So it's absolutely okay to make mistakes, but of course, it's a bigger conversation about creating that environment for everybody to feel comfortable making mistakes. And I think that it, once again, all starts with conversations.
Yeah, there is actually a brain basis to how attention-grabbing mistakes are for the brain, and that's because it's evolutionarily adaptive. So I totally agree with you, Kate. It shouldn't be a problem to make mistakes. That's how the brain learns, and it learns much more effectively that way. And I'm just going to revisit something I touched on earlier, sleep, the importance of sleep. If you're well rested, you're much less likely to make mistakes. And there's this phrase, work-life balance, that implies that work and life are separate, but you carry your brain and your body with you throughout the day, whether you're in bed at home or at work. And so doing what you can to look after yourself at work and at home, sleeping well, that will help reduce the likelihood of mistakes.
Thank you. Charlotte, I think the next question will be for you. Is there a reduction in cortisol with the 4-day week?
So there's some data about to come out from the German national trial on this. We haven't had the data just yet, but they have measured it by taking hair samples, because if you don't know, cortisol actually comes through into the growth of the hair. So my colleague Julia Bachmann in Germany has been studying this, but we haven't got the analysis through just yet. Of course, the hypothesis is that cortisol may reduce. On our Sussex study, we're looking at blood samples to study the immune system, because we know that a bad night's sleep, stress and shift work can impact on the immune system. So certainly there are physiological markers in the body that relate to our working lives, and that's a really exciting current area of research.
Thank you. The next question I've got is around the differences between working from home or in the office in terms of productivity. So, and generally for the overall population, many companies are now reducing days per week from working from home, citing productivity as a main reason for being in the office more. So this question is, the question person is curious to hear your views.
To be honest, I mean, obviously it's all in the news, although I'm not watching news, but I'm still informed about companies asking everybody to come back to the office. I don't think that is related to productivity, to be honest. I think that's just an excuse, but that's a completely different topic. But speaking about productivity, working from home versus working in the office, I think once again, it requires context. It's very contextual. Let's take, for example, if you are an extrovert, you will probably enjoy working in the office much more, and you're going to be much more productive as well, because you need that energy from people, right? And we talked earlier, I mentioned the formula of productivity. It includes energy part. As an introvert, I'm an introvert, for instance, I lose my energy around people, although I love talking to people, but I still am aware that I lose my energy. It's draining when I am surrounded by too many people. So that's one aspect of it. Another one, for instance, if you are, I'll give you my personal example. So I used to manage client events. When I was doing client events, I needed to interact a lot with my team, and it would be much more productive to me to be at the office. And I did one of my biggest events during the pandemic, and I was very far away from my team. To be honest, yes, we did it. We had great results, but it didn't feel as productive as it could if my team was just next to me, because I needed to ask questions every single minute. But then there are moments when I didn't have events, and working from home on strategy, for example, or designing workshops, I thrived in my productivity at home. So I think it's really, really contextual. And coming back again to what Charlotte said, experiment. Tweak, right? Replay, learn, build that awareness about yourself. What works for you? What doesn't work for you? Productivity is never one straight line. You don't just get productive. It's a continuous journey. It's a continuous journey of learning what works for you and what doesn't, and context also change, roles change, so where you are in your role today. So I think it's really a big question, and I hope the answer helped.
Fantastic. I think we still have over 20 questions, which is amazing, but we're running very short on time now. So I'll probably have to make this the last question, I'm afraid. But we'll look to come back with further information. So thank you everyone for their engagement. And sorry, we haven't quite got to them all. But the last question we've got here is, how should we manage being in meetings efficiently that are virtual, as it's so tempting to email, etc., as well as trying to contribute to the meeting? And I remember earlier, I found it quite astounding the amount of meetings where people are, the percentage of are multitasking. So I think it'd be helpful to have any tips around how we can do better in virtual meetings to finish today.
I think you'll be surprised, but it's not very different from being in meetings in person. All right. So number one tip is notifications off and phone far away. So right now, my phone is behind me, so I can't turn around, and is on flight mode. So there is no way it is distracting me, right? And so that's number one. It's the easiest one. If you're going to a meeting, for example, I mean, just leave it in another room if you're working from home, right? Or in your drawer if you're working in the office, so it doesn't distract you. The second one, I think this is a fantastic tip overall. Go back, if you're not doing it yet, to handwritten notes. Because when you are taking notes, especially a lot of people now use AI for meeting notes, what happens is that we are outsourcing that activity and our brain becomes lazy. We get easily bored, we listen less, so we're making less effort. And that's why we're much more prone to go on email and multitask or do something else. So handwritten notes will definitely help. And the third one, ask questions. Just engaging yourself and asking more questions. So having those conversations, or if you're leading a meeting, engage people, ask them questions, right? Because we need that sort of interaction. That's what was going to extend our attention. Because the reason why we start multitasking is because we lose our attention too fast, actually 10 minutes after the meeting starts. So that's sort of 3 tips that you can easily implement today to stay more focused and monotask in meetings. You'll see how you'll feel very differently about the productivity in meetings if you just apply these 3.
Fantastic. Well, I think that is probably all the time that we've got, I'm afraid. Again, thank you so much, Charlotte and Kate. We've been incredibly privileged at Posturite to have you join us today. And I hope all our delegates, and I'm sure all our delegates, found that as interesting as I did. A quick bits of housekeeping to finish is that if you haven't subscribed to our mailing list to be updated about our future webinars, please make sure you do that. We will be sending the recording around. We'll be sending around any resources available to you off the back of this webinar. So feel free to keep an eye on your inbox as well. So thank you everybody for your time and all of your engagement. And we've really appreciated it. And we look forward to seeing you on our upcoming webinars.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.